The Invisible Struggle. Introduction. There is a quiet war that most people never see. A war fought not on battlefields, but within the walls of the human mind. Every day, we resist what is. We fight our circumstances. We struggle against time, against others, against ourselves. And yet every act of resistance binds us more tightly to the very thing we wish to escape. We think we are pushing life forward, when in truth, we are only tightening its knots. Florence Scovel Shinn called this the law of non-resistance. She said, "Whatever man fights, he strengthens, and whatever he blesses, he dissolves." In those few words lies one of the most misunderstood secrets of spiritual mastery. Because life does not yield to force, it yields to flow. The universe does not obey struggle, it harmonizes with surrender. We live in a culture that worships resistance. We're taught to fight for success, to battle through pain, to conquer life as if it were an enemy. And in doing so, we forget the most essential truth. The divine never fights. The sun doesn't wrestle the darkness, it simply shines. The ocean doesn't resist the shore, it kisses it endlessly. The flower doesn't force itself to bloom, it unfolds by rhythm, not by will. In nature, nothing struggles, and yet everything is accomplished. That is the law of non-resistance. Florence wrote, "Bless the situation, and it has no power to hurt you." Those words carry a frequency of peace so deep it feels like prayer. To bless what once seemed threatening is to reclaim your spiritual authority. To fight your fear is to feed it. To deny your emotion is to deepen it. To bless what hurts is to transform it. The energy you bless changes form. It can no longer remain in opposition to you, because blessing is the vibration of love, and love dissolves all resistance. But let us be clear, non-resistance is not passivity. It is not indifference or weakness. It is spiritual intelligence. It is the art of moving with divine order instead of against it. When you stop resisting, you do not surrender your power. You return to it. Because true power never fights, it flows. This audiobook is about remembering that flow. It is about learning to trust the rhythm of divine order, even when appearances seem chaotic. It's about understanding that everything that rises against you is not an obstacle, but a mirror, a reflection of where your own resistance still hides. And once you see it, truly see it, you no longer fight the reflection. You smile, you bless it, and the mirror clears. That is the moment peace begins. That is the start of true manifestation. That is when life stops being something you manage and becomes something that moves through you, effortlessly, beautifully, divinely. Chapter 1. The War Within. Most people believe their greatest battles are fought out there, in the world of circumstances, of obstacles, of other people. They point to their surroundings and say, "This is why I struggle. This is why I cannot rest. This is why peace escapes me." But every war is born within. Every storm that rages outside begins as resistance inside the mind. It is the unseen friction between what is and what you wish would be. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this truth deeply. She said, "Man's word is his wand, but it cannot act through fear or anger. Because when your inner world is divided, when one part of you prays for harmony while another secretly clings to control, your power fractures. You become both the builder and the destroyer of your own creation. You cannot pour from a vessel that trembles. You cannot hear divine instruction while shouting at life. And you cannot receive miracles with clenched fists. Resistance is not strength. It is fear in disguise, fear pretending to be control. The mind believes that by tightening, by managing, by forcing, it can protect you. But control is not safety. It is separation. It cuts you off from the current of divine order and forces you to live in reaction instead of revelation. The heart whispers, "Let go." The mind answers, "But if I let go, I will fall." And so begins the silent war between the self that wants peace and the self that wants proof. Florence wrote, "Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly." Faith releases, resistance holds. Faith expands, Resistance contracts. You can feel it in your body. Resistance tightens your jaw, shortens your breath, curls your shoulders. Faith releases your spine, opens your chest, deepens your breathing. Resistance says, I must fix this. Faith whispers, it is already handled. One contracts the flow of life, the other allows it to move freely through you. When you resist, you argue with divine timing. You are saying, this shouldn't be happening. But when you release, you say, even this has purpose. That is not resignation, it is revelation. Resistance is a form of disbelief. It says, I don't trust that God knows what he's doing. But non-resistance, the art of inner surrender, and says, I trust that what's unfolding is for my good, even if my mind cannot yet see how. The universe is precise. It does not make mistakes. Florence Scovel Shinn called this divine order, the invisible rhythm that governs all things. When you resist, you interrupt that rhythm. When you surrender, you move with it. We live in a culture that glorifies struggle. We admire those who fight, who grind, who never give up. But struggle and strength are not the same thing. The oak does not resist the storm. It bends and survives. The river does not fight the rocks. It flows around them and continues its path. Everything that truly endures does so through flexibility, not force. Even the universe expands in silence, without resistance. So must you. Florence said, bless the situation, and it has no power to hurt you. Blessing neutralizes resistance. When you bless what once seemed against you, you align with the highest vibration, love. And in that frequency, no opposition can remain. Blessing is the ultimate act of spiritual disarmament. It is saying to the universe, I no longer choose to feed fear. I choose peace instead. To fight your fear is to feed it. To deny your sadness is to deepen it. To bless what hurts is to transform it. That is the paradox Florence revealed. You do not heal by resisting the wound. You heal by allowing love to reach it. Resistance freezes energy. Acceptance restores its flow. When you stop labeling your experiences as good or bad and begin to see them as teachers, your suffering softens into wisdom. Every argument with life makes life louder. Every thought of, this shouldn't be, creates more of what you wish to avoid. The universe is like a mirror. It does not judge, it reflects. And if your reflection is one of resistance, it will show you more reasons to resist. That's why Florence said, no man is your enemy. No man is your friend. Every man is your teacher. She was pointing to this law. Everything that confronts you does so to reveal a vibration within you that still demands your attention. When you see this clearly, resistance dissolves. You no longer curse the mirror, you thank it. Resistance always begins with the ego. The ego says, if I don't control it, it will collapse. But the soul smiles and says, if I release it, it will rise. The ego thrives on resistance because conflict is its oxygen. It defines itself by contrast, by what it is not. Without something to fight, it feels meaningless. That is why the ego secretly creates battles, even in peace. It wants to remain the hero in a story that has already ended. But spirit needs no story, it moves quietly. It doesn't push, it permeates, it doesn't shout, it sings. And the moment you stop fighting, that song becomes audible again. It's the music of divine order, the sound of the river that never resists yet carves canyons. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that resistance is always born from fear, and fear is faith inverted. Fear says, what if it goes wrong? Faith says, it already went right. Fear is faith in the wrong direction, and the cure for fear is not control, it's surrender. She wrote, when man is undisturbed by loss, he receives immediately the greater gain. To be undisturbed is to be in alignment with the law. It's to understand that the universe is always arranging something better than what you imagined. That's why non-resistance is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's trusting that divine intelligence knows how to heal, how to replace, how to restore. You were not born to fight life, you were born to flow with it. And when you do, life stops being an opponent and becomes your collaborator. So take a breath. Feel where your body holds tension, the shoulders, the jaw, the chest. That is resistance made visible. Now release it. Let the breath carry it away. Whisper softly to yourself, I let go. I bless this moment. I trust the order behind it. Every time you do this, the war quiets, the world softens, and peace, that ancient friend, returns home to you. Because peace was never gone, it was only waiting for your permission to enter. When you let go, nothing essential is lost. What falls away was never meant to stay, and what remains is what you were always seeking. The unshakable calm of a heart that no longer resists. That is the end of the war within. That is where your true power begins. Chapter 2. The Law of Non-Resistance. The law of non-resistance is one of the highest spiritual laws. It is simple, but not easy. It says, whatever you fight, you strengthen. Whatever you bless, you dissolve. This is not a metaphor. It is energetic law, the mechanics of vibration itself. Energy flows where attention goes, and attention charged with emotion becomes power. When you fight something, you feed it. When you bless it, you release it. Florence Scovel Shinn understood this truth like few others. She said, resentment, resistance, and fear clog the channels of success. Bless the situation, and it has no power to hurt you. Her words carry the calm authority of one who lived inside divine rhythm. To resist is to jam the mechanism. To release is to restore it. Think of your life as a great river, moving with perfect intelligence. It knows its path. It knows where it must turn, where it must pause, and where it must fall into the sea. Now imagine standing in that river trying to push against the current. Every muscle strains, every breath shortens. The current is not angry. It is simply doing what it was created to do. And the moment you stop resisting, it carries you effortlessly forward. That is how divine order feels when you stop fighting it. Florence called this the law of non-resistance. It is the art of stepping out of your own way so life can finally do its sacred work. She wrote, nothing stands between man and his highest good but resistance. Resistance is the wall. Blessing is the key. When you bless what once seemed difficult, you are not pretending that it is easy. You are shifting dimensions. You are saying to the universe, I trust that even this has purpose. Even this is part of my good. That simple act of inner surrender transmutes energy. The thing that looked like opposition becomes assistance. The challenge that once frightened you becomes a teacher. And what once seemed like a closed door opens without effort. Because resistance was never about what was happening. It was about what you believed about it. Florence Scovel Shinn often quoted the words of Jesus, resist not evil. She explained that this command was not about weakness or compliance, it was about power. To resist evil is to make it real in your mind. To acknowledge its illusion and bless it is to dissolve its hold. Resist not means give it no energy. Do not match its vibration. Do not enter its frequency. Because what you match, you magnify, and what you refuse to match loses momentum. This is the secret of spiritual authority, quiet neutrality. The moment you stop fighting, you rise above the battlefield, and from that higher place, everything below begins to organize in your favor. Florence wrote, be undisturbed by adverse appearances. Rejoice because you know that the tide of destiny has turned. To be undisturbed is to live in non-resistance. It's not apathy, it's absolute faith. It means you no longer define reality by appearances, but by divine law. You stop saying, I'll be at peace when this ends, and start saying, I'm at peace now, and that peace will end this. Non-resistance turns reaction into revelation. Every delay becomes preparation. Every ending becomes redirection. Every no becomes the whisper of a higher yes. That is divine mathematics, subtraction that multiplies. But how do we live this truth in a world that constantly provokes reaction? Begin small. When someone criticizes you, bless them silently. Say inwardly, only harmony comes from me, only harmony returns to me. When a delay frustrates you, affirm, divine order is working here. I release the need to control. This is not denial, it's alignment. You are retuning your energy from resistance to resonance, from chaos to calm. And the universe, always listening, responds immediately. Because creation is not personal, it is vibrational. It does not care about your words, it mirrors your energy. When you radiate peace, peace returns. When you radiate trust, life rearranges itself to honor your faith. And when you radiate love, even your so-called enemies become instruments of your growth. Florence Scovel Shinn told a story about a woman who was owed money and could not collect it. She was angry, resistant, and worried. Florence told her to bless the situation, to release her resentment and affirm, "I bless the man who owes me and I bless the money. It will be returned to me under grace in perfect ways." Within days, the debt was paid in full. Because blessing released the blockage that resistance had created. She stopped fighting and started flowing, and the universe, relieved, could finally deliver what was hers. That is how quickly divine order responds when resistance ends. Resistance is like a knot in the rope of life. Every time you pull harder, the knot tightens. But when you let go, the rope unravels itself. Your role is not to pull, it is to allow. To trust that life knows the way better than your mind ever could. When you bless what you fear, you are not ignoring it. You are transforming it. You are taking its energy and redirecting it toward light. And light, once remembered, always dissolves darkness. So when fear arises, say softly, "I bless this feeling. I release it to divine love." When confusion clouds your path, say, "I bless this moment. Divine clarity guides me now." When opposition appears, say, "I bless this reflection. I stand still, and divine order reveals itself." Each blessing is a thread of gold woven into the tapestry of your destiny. Each surrender is a door opening to peace. Florence concluded this teaching with a simple yet eternal truth. Be a non-resistant instrument of good, and nothing can disturb your peace. Non-resistance is the spiritual art of being light, so light that nothing can cling to you. It is the return to innocence, the state of grace that precedes all miracles. It is the vibration that says all is well. And when you live there, the river of life carries you effortlessly toward every blessing you've ever prayed for. Not because you fought for them, but because you flowed with them. Chapter 3. The Ego's Trap. The ego is a master of disguise. It pretends to protect you, but it keeps you prisoner. It promises freedom, yet feeds on your fear of losing control. It whispers, "If I don't manage it, it will fall apart." And that whisper becomes a chain around your spirit. Florence Scovel Shinn called the ego the adversary within. Not because it is evil, but because it is loud. It drowns out the still, small voice of divine wisdom. It fights where spirit would flow. It worries where faith would rest. It resists where love would allow. The ego cannot trust, because trust means death to it. Trust requires surrender, and surrender is the one thing ego cannot do. It lives through tension, identity, and story. It needs conflict to confirm its existence. The ego says, "I am what I do." Spirit says, "I am what I am." The ego says, "I must prove my worth." Spirit says, "I am already whole." The ego says, "When this changes, I'll have peace." Spirit whispers, "Peace is what changes this." And yet, most people live from the ego's voice, not spirit's. They push, control, force, not because they are bad, but because they are afraid. Afraid that letting go means losing everything. But what if letting go is how you gain it all? Florence wrote, "Infinite Spirit opens the way for my immediate supply. I do not resist. I let life flow." This was her secret. She didn't pray with tension. She prayed with release. Because she knew that divine law does not respond to panic, but to peace. There once was a woman who came to Florence in despair. She'd been trying to sell her home for months, yet every buyer vanished at the last moment. She was desperate, anxious, and angry at the situation. "I've prayed, I've worked, I've done everything right," she said. "Why is nothing happening?" Florence smiled and said gently, "My dear, you are pushing your good away with the force of your own will. Stop trying to sell the house. Bless it instead." The woman frowned. "Bless it?" "Yes," Florence said. "Every morning stand in your home and say, 'I bless this house, I bless its next owner. I release it under grace and in perfect ways.'" Reluctantly, the woman obeyed. Each day she repeated the blessing, not as a strategy, but as surrender. Within 2 weeks, a buyer appeared, kind, generous, and ready to purchase at the perfect price. Florence smiled again and said, "You see, the moment you stopped resisting the outcome, the divine could move freely." That is the ego's trap. It makes you believe that struggle equals progress, that tension equals control, that panic equals responsibility. But Spirit knows better. Life unfolds not through anxiety, but through alignment, not through force, but through faith. Florence used to say, "Faith never argues or resists, it simply knows." The ego debates with the universe, faith listens. The ego insists, faith allows. The ego demands, faith declares. To live in non-resistance, you must learn to recognize when the ego is speaking. You will feel it in your body, the tightening, the urgency, the fear of what if. That feeling is your signal. The mind has taken the wheel. Pause. Breathe. Whisper softly, "Not my will, but divine will through me." You will feel a loosening inside, a quiet shift. The ego will fall silent, and what remains is awareness, calm, vast, eternal. Florence wrote, "The only enemy man has is himself, his doubts, his fears, his unbelief. That is the battle, not against people, not against fate, but against our own disbelief in divine order. When you release the ego, you release struggle. And when struggle ends, miracles begin." The ego believes in cause and effect. Spirit believes in divine timing. The ego sees delay as denial. Spirit knows delay is preparation. The ego says, "I must make this happen." Spirit says, "It is already done." Every problem that seems impossible is not waiting for more effort. It's waiting for less resistance. The more you push, the more reality mirrors the struggle. But when you stop pushing, the reflection changes. Florence understood this profoundly. She said, "Whatever you prepare for, you attract. So if you prepare for battle, battle comes. If you prepare for peace, peace arrives. If you prepare for failure, failure fulfills your prophecy. The universe fulfills your preparation, not your desire. The ego always wants to do, but the mystic learns to be, because being is the highest doing. In being, action becomes inspired, not forced. Non-resistance doesn't mean inaction. It means moving without friction. It means doing from flow, not fear. Jesus said, "Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin." He was not condemning work. He was revealing divine flow. The lilies grow because they align with their nature. They do not strive to bloom. They simply allow light to reach them. So too with you. The more you let go, the more life gives. The less you fight, the more you receive. And the quieter your spirit, the clearer your path. So ask yourself now, where are you still fighting? What outcome have you gripped so tightly that spirit cannot breathe through it? Where are you resisting love, abundance, healing, by trying to control their arrival? Release it. Bless it. Say softly, "I no longer fight. I trust the divine order that moves through all things." You are not losing control. You are gaining alignment. And in alignment, everything that belongs to you arrives in perfect peace. Florence called this the magic path of non-resistance, the invisible road where everything moves in your favor because you have stopped moving against yourself. The ego's trap ends the moment you recognize it, and recognition is not war. It is awakening. Once you see that you are not the one pushing the river, you remember you are the river, and nothing real can ever flow against you. Chapter 4. The Art of Surrender. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when effort no longer works, when prayers feel heavy, affirmations sound mechanical, and the harder you try, the more life resists. That is not failure. That is the invitation to surrender. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, "When man can wish without worrying, every desire is instantly fulfilled. Surrender is that sacred state, wishing without worry. It is the end of struggle and the beginning of trust." To the world, surrender sounds like defeat, but in spirit, surrender is power. Because only when you stop forcing can divine intelligence move. Only when you release your grip can grace take your hand. Surrender is not about giving up. It is about giving over, handing every illusion of control back to the infinite mind that created you. You stop saying, "I must make this happen," and begin saying, "It is already done. Now I rest in its unfolding." The art of surrender begins with humility, not the kind the world praises, but the kind that empties the heart. It is admitting that the human mind is not the author of miracles. It can think, it can plan, it can imagine, but it cannot create divine order. That belongs to God. Florence wrote, "It is man's part to prepare his consciousness for the manifestation of his desire. He must act as if he had already received. That 'as if' is the bridge between will and faith. Surrender is not passive. It is the most courageous action of all, because it means trusting the unseen more than the visible, the silence more than the noise, the divine whisper more than the world's roar. To surrender is to open your hands and say, "I no longer need to carry this alone." It is to breathe in peace and let it exhale through you. It is to remember that life was never against you, only waiting for you to stop resisting it. Florence called surrender a magnetic attitude of faith. She said, "Nothing stands between man and his good but resistance. Resistance blocks the flow. Surrender opens it. The moment you release, everything rearranges. The very forces that seem to oppose you start to assist you. The walls that looked solid begin to shimmer and part. Because the universe is not made of stone, it is made of spirit, responding to your vibration." Florence told the story of a woman who desired a certain position at work. She pushed for it, prayed for it, demanded it, but nothing moved. Frustrated, she came to Florence. Florence smiled and said, "Stop asking, start blessing. Bless the position, bless the company, bless the person who has it now, and then release it." The woman obeyed. She stopped pleading and began blessing. She affirmed, "If this is mine by divine right, it comes to me easily and perfectly. If not, something better is on its way." Within days, the other person resigned unexpectedly. The woman was offered the position, without asking again. That is the rhythm of divine timing. When you stop clutching, life delivers. When you stop begging, grace speaks. Surrender is not laziness, it is alignment. It means you act, but without attachment. You move, but without fear. You speak, but without demand. Because the energy behind your actions determines their fruit. Florence said, "The game of life is a game of boomerangs. Man's thoughts, deeds, and words return to him sooner or later with astounding accuracy." Surrender changes what you send out. When you act from peace, you sow peace. When you move from trust, you attract trust. When you think from divine order, the outer world must mirror divine order back. That is not philosophy. It is law. True surrender happens when you stop bargaining with God, when you no longer say, "If you do this, I'll believe," but instead, "Because I believe, it is already done." That is not hope. That is certainty. That is the language heaven understands. You cannot surrender halfway. You cannot give 90% to spirit and keep the rest for the ego. Surrender is all or nothing. It is the death of worry and the birth of wisdom. Florence wrote, "All things are possible to the believer, and to believe is to act as though it were so. When you act from that certainty, you move as one who has already received. You stop reaching, you start radiating, you stop asking, you start knowing. And in that knowing, miracles unfold without effort. Surrender is trust in motion. It is not the end of the journey, it is the doorway into divine partnership. You do not stop moving, you stop moving alone. When you live in that state, peace becomes your natural posture. Opportunities come without strain, answers arrive without struggle, and what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Because you have aligned your energy with the highest law, the law of non-resistance, the law of divine flow, the law of trust. Florence said it best: faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. That is surrender, that is power, and that is the moment heaven rushes in. Chapter 5. The Flow of Divine Order. There is an invisible rhythm that moves through all things. It is older than time, wiser than desire, and more precise than any human plan. Florence Scovel Shinn called it divine order. She wrote, "There is a place that you are to fill and no one else can fill it, something you are to do which no one else can do." Divine order is not coincidence. It is the choreography of the infinite. It is the law behind every perfect meeting, every delay that protects you, every detour that delivers you to destiny. When you live in resistance, you fight this order. When you surrender, you become one with it. To flow with divine order means to trust that the timing of your life is not random, that what seems late is actually on time, that what seems lost was only being rearranged for your highest good. The human mind believes it knows the way. It draws plans, sets deadlines, demands results. And yet the more it insists, the more things slip from its grasp, because divine order cannot be forced. It moves according to spiritual law, not human impatience. Florence said, "Infinite Spirit opens the way for my right place, my right work, my right happiness. Divine order is established in my life now." She didn't say tomorrow. She didn't say someday. She declared it now, because divine order is not a future event. It is a present vibration. The moment you align with it, the universe begins to move in your favor. Divine order is not linear. It doesn't follow your calendar. It follows your consciousness. The higher your vibration, the faster the alignment. The lower your resistance, the smoother the path. Think of divine order as a great current beneath the surface of your life. It carries you toward every answered prayer. But if you thrash and fight, you slow your progress. The current is never the problem. It's your resistance to it that causes pain. When you trust divine order, you can finally rest. You stop trying to make things happen and begin allowing them to unfold. That's when doors open that you never even knocked on. That's when opportunities appear from directions you never considered. Florence once told a student, "Never run after a thing. If you chase it, it will run from you." She knew that divine order delivers what is yours without effort. The chase is proof that you believe it is not yours. Faith, on the other hand, stands still and attracts. She often used the phrase, "under grace and in perfect ways." Those words were her key to divine timing. They mean that whatever is meant for you will arrive without struggle, in ways that bless all involved. No harm, no haste, no force. The world teaches urgency. Spirit teaches rhythm. Divine order is not a race, it's a symphony. Each note must sound in perfect sequence for the song of your destiny to play. If one note comes early, the melody is broken. If it comes too late, the harmony is lost. But when you trust divine order, the song plays beautifully without your interference. Florence once told the story of a woman who longed for marriage. She prayed daily, but nothing happened. Her desire turned into worry, her faith into frustration. Florence told her, "You are not waiting for your husband as he is waiting for your peace." The woman was stunned. Florence continued, "You must come into divine order before the right partner can appear. Bless your solitude, bless your preparation, bless the timing." The woman began to bless her life as it was, her mornings, her work, her solitude. She said daily, "Divine order governs my relationships. What is mine comes to me easily and perfectly." Months later, she met a man through a series of coincidences so perfect it could only have been the hand of spirit. The marriage that followed was effortless, because she had first married peace. That is how divine order works. It never withholds, it prepares. Divine order cannot be rushed, but it also never delays. It arrives the moment you stop resisting and start resonating. You cannot speed it up with panic, but you can delay it with fear. Because divine order speaks the language of stillness. When your mind is loud, you cannot hear its guidance. When your heart is calm, you can feel its direction. Florence said, "There is a supply for every demand and a demand for every supply. That means nothing is ever missing. Whatever you seek is already seeking you, but it cannot find you if you are vibrating in anxiety or control. The bridge between you and your good is faith. The moment you step into calm trust, divine order crosses that bridge and meets you halfway. To flow with divine order is to live without strain. It is to move through life as water moves through a river, adapting, flexible, but always reaching the sea. You stop forcing, you start feeling, you stop demanding, you start allowing. When you let divine order lead, life becomes orchestral. Everything and everyone enters your path at the precise moment you are ready to receive them. You begin to see that nothing was ever out of place, only out of perception." Florence's words echo through time. Faith knows it has already received. To live that truth is to live in harmony with divine order. You no longer chase, you align. You no longer wait, you prepare. You no longer resist, you rise. And as you do, the river carries you exactly where you were meant to go all along. Chapter 6. The Blessing That Dissolves Fear. Every fear you carry is waiting to be blessed. That is the secret Florence Scovel Shinn whispered to all who sought her counsel. Not to fight fear, not to escape it, but to bless it. Because blessing is not denial, it is divine alchemy. It is how light speaks to darkness and transforms it. Blessing does not ignore the shadow, it changes its frequency. Florence said, "Whatever man blesses increases. And what you bless with love loses its power to frighten you. When you bless your fear, you are not saying, 'I am happy this exists.' You are saying, 'I recognize divine order even here.' That recognition is liberation. It takes the sting out of the storm. It turns panic into peace, because no shadow can remain where light has been consciously invited. Blessing is an act of remembrance. You are reminding yourself that God is present, even here, even now. When you bless, you dissolve separation. And separation is the root of all fear. Fear says, 'I am alone.' Blessing says, 'I am surrounded by grace.' Fear contracts. Blessing expands. Fear doubts divine timing. Blessing declares, 'All is in perfect order.' Florence understood that fear feeds on attention, and blessing starves it. She wrote, "Every man is a golden link in the chain of my good." That included those who had wronged her. She did not curse them, she blessed them, because she knew that to curse is to curse yourself, and to bless is to release yourself from the vibration of conflict. She once told a story about a woman tormented by a difficult neighbor. Every day the neighbor complained, criticized, and caused trouble. The woman prayed for the situation to end, but her prayers were filled with anger. Florence smiled and said, "My dear, stop condemning her. Bless her. She is your teacher until you learn peace." So the woman began blessing the neighbor daily. She said, "I bless her with peace, love, and understanding. I see her surrounded by divine harmony." Days passed, then weeks. The neighbor grew quieter, gentler, and soon she moved away. The woman realized that it was not the neighbor who had changed first. It was her. Blessing had shifted her vibration, and the outer world simply followed suit. Florence called blessing the shortest road to freedom. She said, "When you bless a situation, you neutralize it. That means no matter how heavy, tense, or frightening a circumstance may seem, blessing removes its charge. Try it now. Think of something that has been weighing on you, a worry, a delay, a relationship, a fear. Breathe deeply and whisper, 'I bless this with divine love. I bless this with divine order. I bless this with peace.' Can you feel it? The energy softens. The weight lifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You stepped out of resistance and into radiance. That is the power of blessing. The ego believes blessings are weakness. It says, 'You must protect yourself.' But Spirit knows that blessing is the highest protection, because nothing can attack what vibrates at the frequency of love. Florence said, "Love and goodwill destroy the enemies within and without. She meant that blessing dissolves both external conflict and internal fear, because both are the same, reflections of energy not yet healed. To bless what frightens you is to reclaim it for the light. It's to say you no longer belong to fear, you belong to God, and once you claim that, the situation cannot remain dark. Blessing does not change events, it changes perception. It reminds you that there was never danger, only misunderstanding. That what you thought was an obstacle was actually a divine appointment. That the person who hurt you was the mirror showing you where you had not yet forgiven. Florence's students often asked, "How can I bless what has caused me pain?" She would reply, "You bless it for what it taught you. You bless it because it made you reach higher." That is the hidden grace behind pain. It pushes you toward light. And when you bless the experience, you close the circle. You stop the repetition of that pattern forever. Florence used to say that every blessing is a seed. You may not see it sprout immediately, but it will grow. Blessing plants with energy in divine soil, soil that never fails to yield fruit. Bless your finances, and lack dissolves. Bless your health, and healing accelerates. Bless your past, and guilt fades into wisdom. Bless your enemies, and they lose their power to disturb you. Bless your fears, and they vanish like mist under sunlight. Because to bless is to declare, God is here, and where God is, fear cannot remain. Blessing is not a ritual, it's a remembrance. You are not summoning power, you are aligning with it. You are remembering that you are a vessel of divine energy, not a victim of circumstance. That realization alone dissolves fear. Florence said, "There is no power outside of man. Man is his own devil and his own savior. When you bless, you act as your own savior. You choose the light consciously, moment by moment. You stop waiting for life to change. You start changing your vibration, and life mirrors that change back to you. This is how miracles unfold quietly, not through thunder, but through blessing. Try it again. Bless your breath, bless your heart. Bless this very moment. For the moment you bless the now, you redeem it. And in redeeming it, you free yourself from fear's illusion. That is how Florence Scovel Shinn lived, with her words as wands and her blessings as bridges to heaven. She didn't argue with darkness, she blessed it until it turned to light. Chapter 7. Faith in Motion. Faith is not a thought. It is a movement, a vibration, a pulse that rearranges the invisible before it reaches the visible. Florence Scovel Shinn said, "Faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly." That is not a metaphor, that is instruction. Faith is motion in stillness. It walks before seeing, speaks before hearing, and believes before proof. It does not ask for signs, it creates them. Faith is the bridge between the spiritual and the material. It is the hand of the soul reaching into divine substance and shaping it into form. To believe without acting is to dream without awakening. To act without believing is to move without power. But when faith and action merge, reality obeys, because faith is the unseen law that commands creation. Florence often said, "You must live as if you already possess your good." That, "as if," is the most sacred phrase in metaphysics. It is the signal that tells the universe, "I am ready." When you live as if, you are not pretending, you are preparing. You are stepping into alignment with your answered prayer. Faith in motion is not waiting, it is becoming. It's walking like the healed, speaking like the prosperous, loving like the fulfilled. Not someday, not when things change. Now, because every time you embody the vibration of what you desire, you collapse the distance between you and it. And the moment that vibration is complete, when you feel it more real than doubt, the outer world must conform. Florence taught that demonstration. The physical manifestation of your good always follows the inner assumption. She said, "Man must prepare for the thing he asks for, when there isn't the slightest sign of it in sight." That is faith in motion. It is acting from certainty rather than from need. It is building the table before the feast arrives. To the logical mind this seems foolish, but in the spiritual realm it is law. Because divine order responds to vibration, not logic. When you act as if, you are no longer pleading for your desire. You are expressing gratitude for its inevitability, and gratitude is the frequency that opens every door. Florence told the story of a woman who desired a new home. For years, she complained about her small apartment and envied others. Florence told her, "Stop speaking of lack, prepare for your good." The woman hesitated. "But I don't have the means yet." Florence smiled and said, "Start packing anyway." So the woman did. She cleaned her closets, blessed every belonging, and said daily, "Divine order brings the perfect home to me, under grace and in perfect ways." Within a month, an unexpected opportunity appeared. A friend offered her a beautiful house at a price she could easily afford. Florence's lesson was simple. Preparation is the highest proof of faith. When you prepare, you declare, "I already have it," and the universe, obedient as always, rushes to confirm that declaration. Faith in motion is not a ritual. It is an atmosphere. You carry it with you. It colors your tone, your thoughts, your expectations. You begin to speak differently, walk differently, think differently, and that inner shift becomes your magnet. The vibration of faith cannot coexist with fear. It dissolves it. Because faith does not come from the mind, it comes from memory. The soul remembering what the mind has forgotten, that you are already one with your good. Florence said, "It is man's faith in God that moves mountains and not his faith in himself." Faith does not demand, it rests. It does not wrestle, it radiates. It does not strain, it knows. Faith is not blind optimism. It is a clear perception. It sees what the eye cannot see because it looks from the soul, not the senses. It recognizes divine order behind delay, abundance behind lack, health behind illness, and harmony behind chaos. It looks at darkness and calls it dawn. To live in faith is to walk through uncertainty as though guided by light you cannot yet see. It is to know that no matter what happens, you are not being tested, you are being trained to trust. Florence said, "Never voice lack or limitation. You are bound by your words and freed by your words." So every time you affirm your good, every time you act from completion rather than longing, you are speaking divine language, the language creation understands. Faith in motion is the rhythm of the universe itself. Planets orbit in faith, seeds bloom in faith, rivers carve canyons in faith. They move forward without proof, trusting the unseen law that sustains them. You are no different. The same law that governs stars governs you, and that law responds not to fear, not to resistance, but to faith in action. When you move with faith, you align with divine order. When you act as if, you draw the future into the present. And when you persist in that vibration, the invisible becomes visible, not through struggle but through law. Faith is not waiting for evidence, it is the evidence. And when your faith begins to move, everything else begins to follow. Chapter 8. Grace in Action. Grace is not an event. It is a movement, the invisible hand of divine love rearranging your life without effort. It arrives not when you deserve it, but when you align with it. And it moves fastest through the one who resists the least. Florence Scovel Shinn called grace the law's higher octave. She wrote, "When man obeys spiritual law, he is under grace and not under karma." That means the moment you act from love instead of fear, from surrender instead of control, from faith instead of doubt, you lift yourself above struggle and step into flow. Grace is not reward, it is resonance. It cannot be earned, only allowed. And the moment you stop fighting life, grace takes over the battle. Florence once said, "There is nothing too good to be true, nothing too wonderful to happen, and nothing too good to last." That is grace, the power that makes all good things possible and permanent. When grace moves, it defies logic. It erases debt in ways accountants cannot explain. It heals bodies that medicine declared impossible. It restores relationships that reason had buried. It opens doors that no man can shut. But grace cannot enter a closed heart, and resistance is the lock that keeps it out. To experience grace, you must live as one who already walks in divine order. You must bless the moment, trust the unseen, and act from love, even when fear demands proof. Then, without warning, everything begins to harmonize. Phone calls arrive at the perfect time. People appear you could not have planned for. Paths open that logic would have never found. That is grace, divine intelligence orchestrating life through the path of least resistance. Florence taught her students that grace is activated through recognition. You must see it before you can receive it. She said, "Always thank before you receive," because gratitude opens the channel for grace to flow. When you give thanks in advance, you declare your faith in divine timing. You stop acting as though God forgot you. You start knowing that every delay, every redirection, every closed door was only grace disguised. Grace is always present, but only awareness reveals it. When you stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "What blessing is hidden here?" you awaken to divine order's perfection, and in that awareness, fear dissolves. Florence told the story of a man who lost his business. He came to her in despair, saying, "Everything is gone." Florence answered calmly, "Then grace is coming. When the old pattern breaks, it means divine order is clearing space for the new." She told him to bless the loss, to affirm, "Divine order is now established in my life. Only good can come of this." He did as she said. Within weeks he received an offer to partner in a new enterprise, one far more prosperous than the last. Florence smiled and said, "You see, the fall was not punishment. It was promotion. Grace was lifting you higher. That is grace in action, the unseen rearrangement that only looks like chaos until it completes its circle. Grace is not fragile. It doesn't depend on circumstances behaving perfectly. It works through imperfection, turning even mistakes into miracles. It turns detours into shortcuts and endings into beginnings. Florence said, "There is no loss in divine mind." Grace confirms this every day. It recycles pain into wisdom, rejection into redirection, loss into liberation. It is the art of divine recycling. Nothing wasted, nothing random, nothing lost. And the only requirement to experience it is trust. Grace moves where gratitude is present. The moment you say, "Thank you," heaven rushes in. Not because your words have magic, but because your heart has opened. Grace is the current that carries open hearts to divine destinations. When you walk in grace, you no longer force blessings, you follow them. You stop fighting for what is already flowing toward you. You become a participant in your own miracle, guided, sustained, and expanded by invisible wisdom. Florence said, "When one door closes, another opens. Stop banging on the closed door and look for the open one." That is grace in action, quiet, practical, and ever precise. It doesn't need your panic, it needs your peace. You don't have to chase grace, you only have to stop outrunning it. It was never behind you. It was always within you. Every time you breathe with trust, you invite it. Every time you bless the moment, you activate it. Every time you surrender your timeline, you witness it. Grace is divine love, performing perfect timing. And when you allow it to move, you realize that life was never testing you. It was guiding you toward this awareness all along. Chapter 9. The Return to Stillness. When the search ends, stillness begins. When the voice of fear grows quiet, the whisper of God becomes audible. And in that silence you realize there was never anything to chase. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote, "Be still and know that I am God." That means turn from appearances and rest in the knowledge that the infinite has already provided. To be still does not mean to be passive. It means to stop arguing with life. It means to step out of noise and into knowing. The journey through resistance, surrender, and faith all leads here to stillness. Because stillness is not emptiness, it is fullness without movement. It is the awareness that everything you have sought has always been within you, waiting for your quiet recognition. Florence called this the Sabbath of the soul. She said, "Man cannot enter rest until he knows that God works and he watches." That is the mystery of stillness. Divine power moves fastest when you stop pushing. The ego cannot comprehend this. It believes rest is a delay and silence is weakness. It asks, "If I don't do something, won't everything fall apart?" But Spirit answers, "If you stop doing everything, I can finally move through you." Stillness is divine cooperation. It is when your vibration becomes so aligned with peace that life begins to serve you instead of challenge you. When you are still, the universe listens, because in that silence you have stopped speaking fear's language and begun speaking God's. Florence told the story of a woman who constantly worried about her son who had gone to war. She prayed night and day, but her prayers were filled with panic. Florence said to her, "My dear, your fear is binding him. You must release him to divine protection. Bless him, then be still." The woman obeyed. Every night, she said softly, divine love surrounds him. Divine wisdom guides him. Divine power protects him. And then she rested. Days later, she received a letter. Her son had been reassigned away from the battlefield to a peaceful post. Florence smiled and said, "When fear stopped praying, faith began working. That is stillness, when you stop trying to save the world and remember that God already has. Stillness is not inaction. It is alignment. It is the calm beneath the waves, the silence that holds every sound. It is the space between your thoughts, the only place where truth can enter." Florence wrote, "Intuition is a spiritual faculty which does not explain but simply points the way. Intuition is the voice that speaks only in stillness. It doesn't argue or justify, it simply reveals. And if you will listen long enough, it will guide you without error. In stillness you discover that manifestation is not creation, it is revelation. You are not summoning new worlds, you are uncovering what was already given. The divine plan was finished long before you arrived. Your task was never to invent it, only to perceive it." Florence said, "The invisible forces are ever working for man who is always pulling the wrong way. To stop pulling is to return to stillness. To let go is to allow those invisible forces to work. When you live from stillness, you begin to notice divine order in every breath. You stop labeling moments as good or bad. You stop asking for signs, because life itself becomes the sign. Every face you meet, every delay, every coincidence becomes an unfolding of grace. That is the miracle of stillness. You no longer live in reaction to life. You live in rhythm with it. In stillness, you see how simple the truth has always been. There is no separation. There is no distance between prayer and fulfillment, between heaven and earth, between you and God. Florence Scovel Shinn lived this truth. She walked through the world calm, fearless, radiant, because she had learned to let divine intelligence think through her. She didn't chase answers, she listened. She didn't force, she flowed. She didn't resist, she rested in faith. And that rest was her power, because the still mind becomes a divine receiver. And when you are still enough, you hear God thinking through you. To return to stillness is to return to origin, the silent center of being where all creation begins. It is the womb of miracles, the sanctuary of faith, the eternal Sabbath of the soul. Every time you breathe deeply, bless the moment, and release control, you enter that sacred space again. And in that space, all striving ends. Because you finally realize you were never waiting for life to change. Life was waiting for you to be still. Epilogue, the law fulfilled. What began as struggle ends as surrender. What began as resistance ends as rest. Florence Scovel Shinn called this the law fulfilled, the sacred moment when thought, feeling, and faith merge into one vibration and reality bows to the soul's stillness. She wrote, "The invisible forces are ever working for man who is always pulling the wrong way. Now you no longer pull. You allow. You move as light moves, without tension, without noise, guided only by divine rhythm." Every law she taught, non-resistance, faith, blessing, divine order, leads here. To the knowing that life is not a contest, but a communion. That you are not separate from your good, you are its channel. That your words, your thoughts, your very breath are acts of creation, and when you align with that knowing, you become the living law itself. The universe no longer responds to you, it responds as you. You are not trying to manifest. You are remembering that everything you could ever desire already exists within divine mind, waiting for your calm recognition. That recognition is fulfillment. Florence's final words in the game of life were simple yet eternal. No man is a success in business unless he loves his work. She meant that love is the secret ingredient behind all demonstration. Love dissolves fear, ends resistance, and fulfills the law. When you move in love, not in worry, not in striving, not in doubt, grace becomes your atmosphere. Every step you take is guided, every delay is perfection, every outcome is divine. Now breathe. Feel the peace that has followed you through this journey. It was never the words that changed you. It was your remembrance of what you have always been, a vessel of divine order, a mirror of infinite love, a being through which heaven expresses itself. This is the end of resistance and the beginning of realization. The law is fulfilled, the game is won, and all that remains is peace.